Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Happy Pi Day, everybody. Welcome to the Black Gold Banneret Podcast. You knew I was going to bust that out. It is the middle of March. My name is Jeff Sharon, alongside Eric Lopez, and coming to you live, well, not live, in a recorded fashion, from Memphis, Tennessee, Brian Murphy. How's the weather up on Beale Street, Murph?
Well, I was going to find out for myself because I was going to go trekking on Beale Street tonight, but there is a massive squall line about to pass through here as we record. So I am all bundled up in the glorious, pretty Motel 6, about 6 minutes of drive away from the beautiful FedEx Forum, ready for basketball, ready for sports.
Let's do this. It is the week of the American Athletic Conference men's basketball tournament. We'll be previewing that in the first part of the show. Lopez is not there. He's back here in Orlando. How are you doing, Lopez? I know that you were monitoring softball today.
Yeah, I'm just having withdrawals. A year ago this week, I was hanging out with Murph at the Amway Center for the conference tournament. So I'm having a withdrawal. This is going to be weird, not having Murph next to me watching basketball, watching Calvin Sampson, loosen his tie and get rid of it and his jacket.
There was a great
withdrawal.
There was a great photo that showed up on the Getty database for Vox Media of the in the photos of the UCF Houston game. Great photo of Sampson ripping off the tie. I got to get that to you guys. I have to get that to you guys. All right.
It's my new wallpaper.
This is new profile pic. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We are at blackandgoldbanneret.com. We are SB Nation's home for UCF sports. You can follow us there and at facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret and on Twitter at UCF_Banneret. You can follow us individually at Jeff_Sharon, Eric Lopez Elo, and Spokes_ Murphy. By the way, I apologize to those of you listeners listening to me right now. I'm actually getting over a cold, so that's why I sound like I have a cold, because I have one. So let's get that out of the way and dive right into UCF basketball, specifically the men, as they get ready for the American Athletic Conference basketball tournament, which is held in their personal house of horrors at the FedEx Forum in Memphis. The Knights do get the first round bye. And they will face the winner of the 5-12 matchup. The Knights ended up dropping to 4th in the standings, and they will face the winner of the 5-12 game, which will be the home team, Memphis, or Tulane. Who, am I right on this, Murph? Tulane hasn't won a game in conference?
You bet. Correct.
Oh, golly. Well,
so in other words, it'll be Memphis, folks.
Yeah. Well, that's why they play the games. You never know.
We should make a small bet here. Like, what do we have to do? Some sort of dare. What do we have to do if Memphis actually does not win this game at home against a winless conference team?
Oh, it would be great. Well, considering the fact that Tulane lost their last game of the year at home on a buzzer beater at the hands of Wichita State, is bad enough.
Tulane.
Or did I say Tulane? But the reason why the Knights ended up dropping to 4th and ended up dropping just out of the top 25 is because they split their last 2 games of the year. They get the win against Cincinnati in dramatic fashion, a tremendous win at home for UCF against the number 20 team in the country, 58-55. Excellent defensive effort down the stretch. But then, we talked about how rough this murderer's row is going to be at the end of the season, right, guys? These last 4 games. At South Florida, they won. At Houston, they won. Home for Cincy, they won. And then they lose the game at Temple on a very emotional night in Philadelphia. Fran Dunphy's last home game, it was senior night. Temple, obviously, on the bubble, much more so than UCF, obviously, even after the Houston and Cincinnati game for the Knights. And Temple's, it was a close game throughout, but Temple ended up pulling away in the final minutes and getting the victory 67-62. So the Knights wrapped the regular season at 23-7 overall, 13-5 in the American. But gosh, it would have been nice to get that last win at Temple. It looked like they had a shot in that game. Murph, you were watching as intently as ever, as was I. It was just one of those things where it's not a case where UCF lost the game. It's just Temple won the game. They had the emotional edge, and that pushed them over the top. But sometimes those games can go a little bit different. Usually, whenever I see a game like that, I'm thinking that the home team just comes out like gangbusters. But UCF played pretty well in this game. Are they going to rue losing this game at Temple, where they are right now, where they may very well have to play Memphis in the first round, or second round rather?
I mean, I don't think so. Just because, they're going to make the tournament, the NCAA tournament, either way. Even if they lose to Memphis, they're going to avoid Dayton and make the NCAA tournament. So I don't think they're going to look back on this Temple loss and say, like, wow, if only we could have won that, things would be everything would be different. Like, that's too far to extrapolate down the road. The game was so emotional for Temple. And really against a team in UCF that it had expended all of its emotion, less than 48 hours prior.
Yeah.
And Johnny Dawkins was very clear. He doesn't want to make excuses, say that his team was tired and that they were worn down after that gauntlet stretch that you mentioned. But he also, in the same breath after the game, did talk about like how grueling this stretch has been for his team and that they were not as sharp as they usually have been. And that's, and it doesn't take, you don't need to be a genius to say that, yeah, they probably wasn't sharp because they just were worn down. And it was, it was a game which I think you would expect them to lose. Now, the way they lost it with 18 turnovers, with everyone except Aubrey Dawkins shooting about 25% from the floor.
Yeah.
BJ Taylor throwing up 2 air balls on wide open shots and missing, baskets in the lane that he usually makes. Like, those are all sort of facets of a team that's tired, and they were. I don't think anybody should be afraid to admit that they were clearly tired on Saturday. I mean, except for Aubrey Dawkins, who coming off his back injury, and you didn't know if he was going to play or not. He scores 36 and goes nuts and has a career high and was unstoppable. But other than that,
36 and 11, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, he was just amazing. Just didn't get any help anywhere else, and UCF turned the ball over too much. But, I mean, it is what it is. And I don't think, anyone's going to look back on that game and say that things would have been so much different if they had won. Yeah, they'd be the 3 seed and not well, actually they'd be they would be the 2 seed, wouldn't they? Because Cincinnati lost.
Yeah, because Cincinnati lost. So, yeah, they could.
Right.
And I believe the scenario was there where they could have been the 2 seed. By the way, the tiebreaker system is a joke.
Yeah.
It needs to be abolished because the reason, because some people are still kind of confused by this, to clarify. The reason Temple wins the tiebreaker is because UCF lost to Wichita State, and both teams played Wichita State twice. Even though UCF actually beat Cincinnati and Temple didn't, because Temple only played Cincinnati once,
right?
And UCF played them twice. That is nullified, which I think is a joke. Yeah. I think.
Well, I can see why. I can see why they do that, though, right? Because you don't want to have a situation where you're deciding a tiebreaker between common opponents where one team played that opponent on the road and the other team played that opponent at home. I get that.
No, but I think there's a better formula. And, Murph and I were at the teleconference on Monday. All the coaches in the league and Mike Oresco, the commissioner, spoke. It's a teleconference. Usually each person talks for about 15, 20 minutes, and everybody's there. And and I forget who it was, but there was a media person that kept asking everybody about, and I like this idea, whereas the tiebreaker should be based on the schedule strength within your conference. So in other words, who played a tougher conference schedule, which clearly UCF did. And I actually like that formula. I think if you played it, because you could, in a way, you could have the same record as another team, but have a completely different schedule with the way these conferences expand. So I think they should do it based on, if it's not, obviously head-to-head should always be the first one. But if not, who had the stronger schedule strength? in the league, within the league.
Yeah.
And UCF should have gotten the nod there.
You
But
mean
it is what
like
it
you
is.
would add up the total record of their opponents and then okay, yeah. I mean, I get that. I think that's fair, but then you're going to have the conference actually implement that, which is the other, and it would be
right now.
Remember it's the coaches who actually, who would have the say on that in terms of the competition,
Sure.
but. I think it's interesting. I mean, I do think UCF kind of caught a bad break here, but I mean, it is what it is, especially, after you play that game like they did against Temple. I wanted to go back real quick and just, wax poetic about the Cincinnati game too, because this felt like a game that UCF would lose where it was close like that, but they managed to pull it out, and they held Jaron Cumberland, who was named the Conference Player of the Year this year, today, in fact. Is that right? To 5 of 18 from the field. Meanwhile, B.J. Taylor was 8 of 19. And we talked about how big that Houston win was, but you could just as easily make the case that the Cincinnati win, I don't know, what do you think, Murph, was probably, in terms of UCF's overall prospects for the NCAA tournament, just as big?
There's no doubt that, they had to win at least one to have a chance, right? Either Houston or Cincinnati. If they lost both, they wouldn't be in the tournament. Getting one of them pretty much put them, I'd say, on the bubble at the very least, and then getting both of them locked them in. It basically made the results of Temple and this tournament that we're going to play mute from a sense of whether or not they're in the tournament, because they're in the tournament regardless.
All right, so that takes us to Memphis now. First round's going to be Thursday. Remember, the top 4 teams in the American get a bye. So it's going to be all day Thursday, 4 games in that preliminary round. UCF does not play. They get the extra day off. And you will get the chance to see who they play at 3 p.m. Eastern time on ESPNU on Thursday. That's when Memphis takes on Tulane. Again, a home game for Memphis here at the FedEx Forum. UCF plays the winner of that game at 2 p.m. on Friday on ESPN2. The quarterfinals on Friday. The first 2 of them will be at noon and 2 on ESPN2. The second half of the quarterfinals will be at 7 and 9 Eastern on ESPNU. So Houston is the top seed, obviously, and should UCF get through should UCF get through that game against either Memphis or Tulane, again, likely Memphis, they would play the winner of Houston against the winner of Game 1, which is USF and UConn. So 2 teams that obviously UCF has handled before, but obviously we're talking about Houston here. You might get another crack at Houston if you get to the semifinals, which would be Saturday in the mid-afternoon with the championship game on Sunday at 3:15 on ESPN. Let's take the worst-case scenario here and say UCF loses in their
to Tulane. That would be the worst.
That would be, yeah, you're right. Fair point. That's the worst case scenario. But let's take the second worst case scenario, and UCF loses to Memphis in that opening game in the quarterfinals. Right now, as I look at bracketmatrix.com, my favorite site in the whole wide world, UCF is a high 8 seed, average seed of 8.13 in 112 brackets. Their highest seed is 5. Their lowest is a 10 as of right now. They're right around Louisville. Above them is Louisville, Iowa State, Cincinnati, and Wofford, who's a conference champion. And then right below them are VCU, Iowa, Oklahoma as the other 8 seeds. Do we see them standing pat at 8, maybe dropping? Where do we see them going at this point?
At worst, they're at 10. It's not that it's a big deal, but at worst, they're at 10 if they're one and done.
Okay, what do you think, Eric?
I think they're in that. Yeah, I kind of agree with Murph. They're an 8 to 10. Here's the thing. I think UCF's caught a break. I know everybody's negative about the Memphis draw and all that, but if they lose to Memphis, and Murph can correct me on this, I believe they're like 50 now in the net, right? Ranking-wise?
We'll pull it up here.
They're just outside of it. Last I checked, they were 52.
53.
Correct.
53 as of right now.
Correct. So that's a quality game. That's a quality game from that standpoint.
It's a quad 2 game. Quad 2.
Does it count? Does it count as a neutral site game?
Yes.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Because the games are hosted by the conference, not the schools.
Right, but yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Sorry.
But yeah, but I think it's a quality game. So if UCF loses that game, nobody's going to punish UCF because of that. It's like, oh, of course, they lost at Memphis. I actually think there's more pressure on Temple, for example, because they're playing Wichita State.
Yeah.
And I think, and I'm going to call it right now, I think Wichita State upsets Temple, and I'm going to tell you why. I think Wichita State's going to have the home crowd advantage there. The other break UCF catches is that Memphis game potentially is a Friday afternoon game, not a Friday night game. I don't know if it will be as packed as it would have been if it was an evening session game. So I actually, and the other thing is, and this might sound crazy, some people believe that you're better off losing early in the conference tournament and get rest for the NCAA tournament than make a run all the way to Sunday, let's say, and then all of a sudden you have to get a quick turnaround. You play Thursday and you come out maybe not as fully sharp. Now,
I don't know if I buy that.
Some people, I mean, that's the theory out there. I'm not saying I agree with it.
Kelvin Sampson talked about that during the teleconference on Monday.
Yes,
Kelvin Sampson was saying that if you win your conference tournament, which usually ends on a Sunday for these major conferences or Saturday, but if you win your conference tournament, you should not have to start play in the NCAA tournament till Friday.
I do think that's fair.
Thursday.
I do think he's right about that. I think that's fair, but I don't know if these teams are coming in gassed. Really, I mean, everybody's gassed at this point of the season, right?
Some people think Cincinnati was last year when they blew a lead against Nevada in the second round. Now, is that an excuse? Probably, but I'm just saying that theory is out there. So, I mean, take it for whatever it's worth. So, I think UCF's in a good spot actually from that standpoint. I don't think they're in a bad situation here because I think they got everything to gain. I think if they win against Memphis and let's say they pull an upset against Houston, they could actually move up to maybe even a 6 seed. Depending on the week they have. I think if they lose to Memphis, I think they stay in that 8-9 range. I think the only scenario where they drop a couple of seeds is if they lose to Tulane, and quite frankly, they would deserve to drop a couple spots if you lose to Tulane.
I'll put it a different way. If they lose and let's say they drop to a 10, I would say that actually helps UCF, and here's why. Yeah, you're in the 8-9. Who do you get in the second round?
1.
You're getting a 1.
Unless you're Virginia.
I don't buy that. I don't buy that.
I totally agree.
I'd rather face a 2 than a 1.
I think they're interchangeable.
No, they're not.
I disagree.
History says they're not interchangeable.
Yeah.
Because a 2 always loses in the second round somewhere. A 1 is much tougher to beat in the round of 32. It's just history of the tournament. Like, you always see at least 1-2 getting knocked out in the first weekend. It always happens. Your odds are much higher of advancing to 16 as a 7 or a 10 than an 8 or 9.
I normally agree with that. I just don't. I think Virginia's a fraud, and I think Gonzaga's a fraud. So I personally, I think those 1 seeds are flawed. They're very overrated, and they could be knocked out in the second round.
Eric dropping the F word, fraud on the. Oh my God.
Oh,
they are. Did we not see Virginia last year? How they?
That's last year, man. You don't think they're pissed?
It's the same narrative. It's the same narrative that Villanova had forever. Like, they can't win in the tournament until they won in the tournament.
I didn't say that. What I'm saying is, I don't think there's a huge gap from a 1 seed to a 2 seed. Like, you're telling me you'd rather play, let's say, Tennessee than play Gonzaga? No, I don't think there's a big difference. No.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah. Give me a weak SEC champion. I'll take it. Anyway.
Tennessee's great. Tennessee's great. Like, in terms of UCF, it'd be a really tough matchup because when you've got Admiral Schofield and Grant Williams inside, that's really tough for them to bang up against those guys. Like, Taco can't stop Admiral Schofield. He's too athletic. But I would much rather face them with their backcourt players than Gonzaga, who can hurt you at every spot on the floor. Last time they shot really poorly against St. Mary's. But Gonzaga has a score everywhere on the floor, or Virginia, who is just a bloodletting defense. Like, if UCF played Virginia, first of 40 probably wins that game.
Yeah, I don't know.
UCF matches up well with them. I do. I really do. Now, I will say this. I think Murph makes a point. I think the tournament's about matchups, regardless of what seed you are. Because you could get the favorable seed in the first round, second round, but if you have a bad matchup, it doesn't matter. I just don't think there's that big gap that there used to be in men's basketball. I think anybody can beat anybody. If you don't play well, look, this team's proven it this year, right? I mean, this is the same team that lost to FAU, so let's not act like, oh, well, they're about to be better off as a 10. Well, you don't know who the 7 seed might be. They could get knocked out in the first round very easily. So I don't know if it's a big benefit to be a 10 or an 8 or a 9. I think in women's basketball, it's a more legitimate case than in men's basketball.
Well, here we are counting our chickens before we've hatched. Obviously, there's a lot of basketball still to be played, but
we've moved on to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, we're already booking our tickets to the Final Four here. But anyway, Murph, you did manage to get a hold of Johnny Dawkins during the teleconference. Is that right?
Yes, I did, and I asked him about what impressed him most with this really great season for UCF, and whether or not they have learned anything from their previous game here at Memphis, which was back in late January.
What was the most impressive part of the regular season that you had, in your opinion?
I think the final stretch was the most impressive. We knew coming down the stretch, the last 5 or 6 games, that we'd be playing, in some amazing environments. We'd be playing against, teams that at that point were, at the top of the league. So including your rival, which is always going to be an amazing game. We played them on the road. 2 games versus Cincinnati during that stretch, Houston during that stretch, Temple during that stretch as well. And just our guys, the resilience they showed during that time. I mean, we needed everybody to step up and perform, and they did that. So I always remember kind of how we finished the season out.
With the seniors on this team, do you feel like there is maybe an added edge to them going into this conference tournament, knowing that this is their last time at a shot at a conference championship? Do you feel like there's a bit more extra fire in them heading into Memphis?
Well, we should be excited. We have another opportunity to compete again. It's our conference tournament, in a great conference. I think all of our guys will be excited, and especially our seniors. Like you said, this is their last one, and I'm sure they want to, go in there and perform well.
You guys probably, you don't want to look ahead to seeing if you guys play Memphis or Tulane, but most likely playing Memphis in that second round on Friday, it would be like a road game, really, and you guys already played them this year. What did you learn from that experience in Memphis the first time that you could possibly use when you might see them again on Friday?
Well, that was so long ago, I can't recall. We're going to watch tape and watch both teams this week. See exactly who is doing what now. Teams are so different from that part of the season at home than they are this time of the year. And we need to do our homework on both teams, both Tulane and Memphis, in preparation. And with Memphis, we know they're a terrific team. They're a senior-laden team. They're playing a lot of seniors. They have terrific young players off the bench that are very talented. And Coach Hardaway's done a really good job with his team. But other than that, we need to just see as this week goes on and we prepare. But I know they're going to be excited. There's going to be a lot of energy in that building for them because they are at Memphis. And we should expect the crowd to be, pretty one-sided.
So, Johnny Dawkins not really wanting to talk about that game against Memphis because it was so long ago. However, I do have to think that there's some of that game that sticks in this team's craw. And the way they played, it was probably their weakest effort, certainly in conference, their weakest effort of the year. They just got run over out of the gate. And I do feel like that game, even if Johnny doesn't want to talk about it, really think about it, I think the players will think about that performance as they head into that game on Friday afternoon. So we'll be interested to see what happens. I will say one thing. You talked about Jaron Cumberland winning the Player of the Year. That should motivate Jeremiah Martin on his home floor, a guy who has scored 40 points and a half this year. And it can light it up from anywhere. I would not be surprised to see him go for 40 tomorrow, or I should say, whenever you're listening to this today. Who knows? Against Tulane. And he's going to be a man possessed because I feel like there's a lot of people who I think he believed it too. And a lot of people, not only here in Memphis, but outside in this conference, people who cover this conference believe that he had a more legitimate case for Player of the Year.
All right, so let's wrap this segment up I'll put both of you on the spot. Eric, I'll start with you. How far does UCF get in this tournament?
I see the semis. I think Houston's really good. It's a tall order to beat Memphis and Houston back-to-back days. I think, Murph, and I don't know what you think about this, I think I'm curious to see Colin Smith and Dayon Griffin in particular. We always talk BJ and Aubrey and Taco. But I think the supporting cast, like Dayon Griffin, I thought was big in the Cincinnati win. I think those guys, how they step up, because there's no days off here. It's back-to-back-to-back. I think those guys play a role here in how far UCF goes here if they get past Memphis and then going into Houston there. And I think that's the thing I'm going to look forward to seeing as far as that'll determine, I think, UCF's success, how far they are, not far they go in this tournament.
So you're saying semis against Houston, and I'll throw one more at you. What seed do they get on Sunday?
Man, I'll say an 8 or a 9. They'll be in the 8-9 game.
Okay, all right. What do you think, Murph?
Yeah, I think they lose to Memphis. I mean, people are going to hate that, but the fact is that UCF in this building is 3-17 all time.
Ugh.
This is dating back to like Conference USA tournaments that were held here and other things. So, they just have a hard time winning here. I think they've won once at Memphis ever.
Last year.
Last year. So, and then, I just think Jeremiah Martin is going to score 40. To that end, though, I think the player to watch, if you want to watch one of the guys who's not, the top three that we talk about, Terrell Allen is going to be so important on both sides of the floor because Memphis is going to press. They're going to press you full court. And UCF had a really hard time handling that last time. Terrell's going to need to be much more poised this time around. And then secondly, as their really, I would say, best perimeter defender right now, certainly in their back, certainly with their guards, I expect to see a lot of him on Jeremiah Martin. There's a size disadvantage there a little bit, but he's been really good at locking down elite scorers recently. So I think him offensively handling the ball and then defensively is very important. However, I do think Memphis wins this game, and I think UCF probably comes into Sunday as a 9.
Okay, all right.
Teams, that's going to be interesting. So you got them as a 9 even with the loss. So you kind of feel that this loss, even if they lose to Memphis, no effect.
It's a quad 2 loss. I mean, it's not like a huge thing.
Yeah.
Again, if they lose and they're an 8, I'd be surprised. If they lose and they're a 10, if they lose and they're a 10, I would not be surprised at all.
All right, rapid fire, real quick. How many American teams get into the tournament?
4.
4? Okay. So you'd have Temple in.
But Temple better be the winner of ECU Wichita State.
Yeah, and then
Murph,
who knows what happens with Memphis?
Memphis could win. They could play themselves into this, right? I mean, they got UCF, then potentially Houston, and then all of a sudden they're on there on Sunday.
They beat UCF and Houston. They beat UCF and Houston back to back. Like that's going to really make it tough.
I mean, Memphis lost 2 games at home all year. They lost to Cincinnati and Tennessee when Tennessee was 3rd in the nation. They've scored 11 more points at home than on the road or neutral sites this year. Now that's a little less in conference. It's not such a widespread. I think in conference they were scoring like 2 more points per game, but still, even Penny Hardaway on Monday was admitting like they're a different team at home. Everyone knows they're a different team at home, and even with the 2:30 start on Friday afternoon, I'm pretty certain that the city's going to come out for this tournament and this team.
All right.
If you're a Temple fan, you better root against Memphis because I could see the scenario where if Memphis wins the tournament or even gets to the final and Temple
could knock
loses
Temple
early,
out. Yeah.
I agree. And I'm telling you, I'm booking it right now. Murph, you and I saw that Wichita fan nation there take over the Amway Center last year.
Yeah. If
they show up in droves in Memphis, that's going to be a home game for Wichita State that night against Temple. And that could be an upset, and they might be sweating it out on Sunday. But I'm going to stick with 4 teams.
That's an 8-hour drive, by the way, Wichita to Memphis. I'm just saying.
Yep.
So, and you got to go.
It's a longer drive from Wichita to Orlando, and it didn't stop them.
It's a fair point. Yeah, and they got to go through Tulsa too. All right. So again, a reminder: UCF is playing the winner of Memphis against Tulane on Friday at 2 p.m. on ESPN2. And remember, wouldn't that be something if Tulane did that? No wins in the conference in the year and they beat Memphis.
How great Memphis is headed.
I know, right? If Tulane wins, we need to have an emergency podcast because we need to reset this game completely again.
Yeah, you're right. We need to bring on Fear the Wave blog to talk about it too. 3 p.m. By the way, Thursday 3 p.m. on ESPNU. That's when you can catch Memphis and Tulane, and the winner of that game would face UCF on Friday. All right, take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk women's hoops in the American Conference, in the American Athletic Conference tournament, getting all the way to the final and playing Geno and UConn, and Geno getting a little testy with Coach Abe after the game. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, Brian Murphy with you here. Talk a little women's hoops for UCF now as the Knights, for the first time not in school history, but for the first time since joining the American, made it all the way to the American Athletic Conference Championship game, where they faced UConn, and, well, let's just say it wasn't as bad as I thought it could be. So UCF beat Tulsa and then Cincinnati in games where they pulled away in the fourth quarter in both their first two games. And then, I mean, you're facing people say, oh, they're the UConn of the whatever, right? Well, now you're facing UConn. So UCF loses the game. 66-45 was the final. But, hey, the Knights got to pull home some second-place hardware, which we saw some of that. They finished at 26-6. With three of those losses coming to Connecticut, and two of them within the state of Connecticut, I might add. KK Wright did not have a good game in that game. Connecticut just does Connecticut things. They shut her down. No Katie Lou Samuelson for the Huskies because she's nursing a back injury. They're going to be a number one seed. They might be the overall number one, either them or Notre Dame. We don't know just yet. But nonetheless, or Baylor. Yep, could be Baylor. But let's pour one out here for Coach Abe and the team here, because my sense from watching them after the game, during the latter portion and after the game, they were down, what is Eric, 45-19 at the half. And in the third quarter, it was an eerily similar game to the one that was here in Orlando last year, don't you think? Because even though UCF fell down, they had only 5 field goals in the first half. In the second half, they were 13 of 26 from the field, 50%. They held UConn to 10 of 26 from the field in the second half. And they didn't, I hesitate to say that they made a game out of it, but they kind of kept pace with UConn to a certain extent, I would say. Outscored them by 5 in the third. Were outscored only by 2 in the fourth. And they didn't let it get to the point where you're like, oh man, this is just a total whitewashing. Now, after the game, this is where things got a little interesting. In the handshake line, and there's video of this, and we posted some of it on our Twitter account. In the handshake line, Geno Auriemma was seen clearly saying something in a sort of testy manner to Coach Abe as they passed each other. He was clearly not happy with how UCF ended the game, where UCF was kind of pressuring UConn's players a little bit. Forced a couple turnovers, and UCF got a couple of fast break baskets. Here's where I think the whole thing kind of got off the rails a little bit. Now, you got the sound from the post-game sound from both of them, right, Eric?
Yeah, I watched it. Yep, I watched it once I heard about it. And I knew this was coming because I saw – see, this is to clear the – because I think some people don't know the full story here. This is what happened because I watched it live when it happened. There was about 45 seconds, I would say, 47 seconds, something to that, left in the game. So Geno subs in all his players. He brings in all the
he brings in like Michaela Combs and Molly Bent and Kyla Irwin, and because he was basically playing a 6-person rotation throughout the game. He had 3 players who played 1 minute. He played a total of 6 players because Samuelson was out. Anyway, go ahead.
So he subbed them in around. It was in the 45 to 49 second mark. I don't remember the exact time, but it was around that time frame. And then they inbound the ball, and UCF traps the player to the point. And this was a 23-point game at the time. And the UConn player got fouled because UCF was trying for a steal, but they trapped. and I see this God love HD TV. I see Geno in the background absolutely staring down at the UCF bench and screaming. And you could hear Adam Amin, my good friend, and Rebecca Lobo, they stopped because they were thrown off. And it's like, oh. And they see Geno there barking. And you could see the assistant coaches for UConn had to restrain him. So this was legit, like, he's ticked. And even Rebecca Lobo is like, well, he's upset because of the trap. And Adam Amin, he's like, well, this game's kind of out of hand. It's a 23-point game. So you could tell there, and then you mentioned the handshake after the game was over. There was a very quick handshake. Very quick handshake. You could tell he was not in the mood. And then, the post-game, this was the last question of the press conference. This was right after he just went off on a rant about all the people that complain that they play in Albany in the region. It's like, why don't you put a bid in if you have a problem with it, basically, and we win. So someone asked him right after he was just fired up about that, about what happened at the handshake line.
That's just typical women's basketball bull. You know, we clear our bench, we put our subs in. All of a sudden, there's a trap in air court. You haven't trapped us one time the whole game. It's just dumb. It's just dumb. It's just dumb. My guys are just hoping that they don't dribble the ball off their foot. Now you're going to trap them. That is what it is. I coach my team. Nobody else's.
So there's Geno. Not happy with that. Typical. I wish that was not the last question of women of the presser, because I would have liked to have followed up with the question like, so Geno, what else is typical women's basketball? Can you clarify
that really? Yeah, that I don't. Kind of like the. You could hear the emotion coming out of it. I don't think he meant to say that. I don't think he meant it to come out the way he did. But that's a crappy thing to say.
Nothing like the face coach of the entire sport putting down the sport.
The whole sport. Anyway, and now Coach Abe had her. Well, it wasn't a response because I think she went first. Is that right, Eric?
Yeah, she went first, and actually I saw her response. She basically said she didn't know what it was about. They're just playing basketball. And her goal, as you kind of alluded to when you recapped the game, was they wanted to make sure that the girls had fun and they played UCF basketball there in the second half, and she was proud of them.
I think this game was just really an exciting, fun, great situation for us. I mean, this team, these seniors, have never been into the championship game of the American Conference, and it's a great accomplishment. And we wanted to just come in here and, just play UCF basketball, have fun, just enjoy this moment. I mean, because we have never been here before, and what we've accomplished this year, UCF has accomplished this year, and our players and our seniors. 3 years ago, our seniors had only won 7 games, and now they're in the championship of the American Conference. So how could I not be so proud of them? I wanted them to enjoy every moment, enjoy last night, and then enjoy today, enjoy the environment, enjoy being in the American Conference Championship, and it was great to see our players had a great time.
So that's Coach Abe on that. Now, I think a few things about that last sequence, and it's funny because I actually had to address this same topic on the softball podcast I host in the Circle. It comes out Mondays, Thursdays, cheap plug. Because there's been a controversial this week because a softball player hit a home run and she did a bat flip. And so the big thing is, well, geez, is that right? Is that a right thing or a wrong thing? It's basically the same conversations that we've had in Major League Baseball that Murph's quite familiar with about the bat flip. Is it an unwritten rule that you don't do that? You do that. And I think in basketball, there is an issue with, and again, well, how do you finish a game? What is if you take out your players, do you not trap? And that's what he was upset about. That was what Geno was upset. It's like, why are you trapping my backup players? I took out my starters with 45 seconds left. This game is over.
As though his backup players don't know how to dribble yet, which I think is really hilarious. They're all 5 stars for crying out loud. Give me a break.
But the point is, there is a sense there, and this has happened in men's basketball this year. There was an incident in Lubbock.
It is a breach of the code between coaches. I can see where he's coming from for there. Yeah.
Correct. And this is not just this has happened in men's basketball. There was an incident in Lubbock this year where Chris Beard put in his walk-ons. They're blowing out Baylor. Baylor's playing back. Basically, everybody's got their backup players. The game is over. It's like a 30-point game. Mm-hmm. And the walk-ons decided, hey, because the crowd, every time the walk-ons, they want to encourage them to shoot. So the walk-on drives to the hole, throws a lob, they throw the dunk, the building goes crazy. Chris Beard goes crazy, literally makes the walk-on, as the buzzer sounds, walk over and apologize to Scott Drew at Baylor about that. And then, so my point is, there is in basketball, there are coaches that believe that once you take out your players, once this game is settled, that is kind of, hey, that's it. We're letting the dogs out. Let's just run out the clock, yada, yada, yada. There are other coaches, and I think Abe qualifies, and I think she would tell you, is we're playing to the last minute. And I think Abe's message here, and you brought it up, I think the whole point of the second half is let's feel good about ourselves leaving this arena. Let's not lose confidence of what we're doing, because we're going to be in the NCAA tournament regardless of this game, and I don't want to lose confidence in this game. So she's trying to I think that's the message she was sending to her team. But that is, I think, and I could tell you, if I had to poll, I think the majority of the coaches in college basketball would have actually probably sided with Geno, just not with the language.
Yeah, I don't know where I come down on this because the other thing is with Geno is, you're always going to get every team's best shot, right? So I get if you feel like it's a breach of the unwritten rules between coaches about, when I call the dogs off, you call the dogs off, and we just play out the string. But by the same token, for him to get that upset over that, I don't think I think that his response overdrew what was merited at that point. Like, if you're that ticked about it, you're Geno freaking Auriemma, for crying out loud. If you're that ticked about it, you stand back and say, hey, okay, all right, let's see what happens next year when we come to your building. Let's see.
Well,
you know what I mean?
That's a good point you make, and I do wonder if part of this, because I used to hear this with Michael Jordan, you just create this, you probably overblow this just for that reason you just said. I wonder if a part of me says he wanted to make that statement, he did that on purpose, so that next year when these two teams play, he can remind his players and say, look what they tried to do. Yeah. And use this as motivation. It sounds silly, but a lot of these
they're not going to let us. They're not going to let up on us, so you don't let up on them.
Exactly, and that's a great point you make. And I think that's really, really, if we get down to if we put Geno inside of a room in a truth serum, were you really that bothered by this? He probably would say no. I think he was planting the seed for motivation for next year. In that regard, and and then that's, I think, part of it, because I remember Phil Jackson, you know this, Jeff, when he was the coach of the Lakers. How many times would he make a big deal about officials and stuff? And coaches sometimes have agendas.
Yeah, they're playing the long game
down the road. Exactly, yeah. And I think that's really a big part of this. I do, and I don't have a problem with, by the way, for the record, what Abe did, because again, I think her goal was to make sure her team felt confident and felt good about themselves, leaving that building. Going into the NCAA tournament, the last thing you wanted, and you made a good point, the last thing you want is leave that building shell-shocked and like, oh my goodness, we just not that good. And I think she made it very clear she wanted her team to feel good about themselves, and they did.
Murph, where do you fall on this whole calling off the dogs thing?
Well, I do want to point out that as Eric tried to say calling off the dogs, he said letting the dogs out.
Who let the dogs out?
Plug for the Baja men.
Good catch there.
Yeah, I had to. That's really the highlight of the podcast for me. This is like extraordinarily petty, right? Like, it's just so petty. I kind of get. I'm even on this. I'm so left wing, libertarian on this sort of thing. Like, I'm totally okay with like guys dunking when they're up by 30. Like, I'm totally cool with that.
And what are you supposed to do? You have an open layup.
Like, yeah, and like, look, if the other team wants to stop them. Play defense. Like, who cares? So like, and this is like even worse because like, okay, I kind of get the point of like, look, we've already won. We're up by 30. We have the ball. We're not going to rub it in your face even more and try to like really show off on you. All right, but for the team that's trailing, if they want to trap or press a little bit, all of a sudden you're offended by this. This gets your sensibilities all out of whack. Like, again, like Eric said, like, and you guys have said, like, these guys are all 5-star recruits. They're playing too. Wouldn't they want to compete as well and try to break that press? I mean, why is this such a big issue? It's not. The fact is, it's not a big issue. Geno thinks it is, but that doesn't mean we have to agree. And I think we don't. And even if I didn't support UCF, I'd have the same viewpoint. This is petty. This is Geno being extremely petty. This is UCF playing a basketball game till the end, and that's all we should care about. There's nothing wrong with that.
All right, two things. What was the quote from Napoleon? In order to display true greatness, you have to be willing to display great pettiness. But that's neither here nor there. I think that the contract, that unwritten contract, if you will, is I pull my starters, you pull your starters. But from that point, when it's backups against backups, to me it should be basically fair game at that point, right? Whatever happens. And Abe played it that way,
Well,
if it was UCF starters pressing UConn's backups, I would agree with Geno, right? But it wasn't.
Right.
So anyway, you were saying, Eric, I'm sorry.
And let's not lose fact. College coaches are egos, have big egos, and let's be honest, Geno's got a big ego. Yeah, and they're control freaks. To Murph's point, I don't.
You guys missed the joke.
College coaches want to control every possession, every situation, and I think that's part of this. Not just in this situation, but what Murph's talking about with the Texas Tech situation. There was an incident in Conference USA with Old Dominion and UAB where a UAB player in the final seconds went up for a layup. He missed it. And the Old Dominion coach, Jeff Jones, went after the UAB head coach about that, and they almost got into a fist fight. And so it's an interesting deal there. Let me ask you this, Jeff, because you and I talked about this during the weekend. We both felt strongly that Coach Abe should have been the coach of the year in the conference. You look at her resume, what she's done this year. All 3 years, they've exceeded expectations. They were picked 4th in the league. They finished 2nd. Her resume this year was similar to Jose Fernandez's resume last year when he won Coach of the Year, finished 2nd in the league, clear cut, and yet she didn't get the vote, which was head scratching to me. Do you think, Jeff, that does she unintentionally, like a situation like this, does she ruffle some feathers? Or because coaches vote for Coach of the Year. And that's why maybe she hasn't gotten the Coaches of the Year, because some of these other coaches that, quite frankly, should be more worried about carrying their own weight. Maybe they're I'm not gonna vote for her because the way they play or this or what blah blah blah. Do you think that played a role in why she didn't win Coach of the Year? Because I think she should have won Coach of the Year. I think it was outrageous. I
think she should have won Coach of the Year. I mean, from the same token of, did Geno Auriemma and UConn really outpace expectations this year? I would say no. In fact,
he did the same thing he's done every year.
You could make the argument that they actually failed to meet expectations. I know they have 2 losses, but how many years are we used to seeing UConn come in with undefeated or maybe 1 loss, right? UCF clearly exceeded their expectations. They were picked, 5th in the league? 4th. Okay, finished in 2nd. Finished the season with 26 wins in 32 games. They're going to the tournament. I don't know what more Coach Abe can ask for. And you and I had that argument on Twitter about KK Wright. Is she, if the league's Player of the Year award were called the most valuable player, is KK Wright the most valuable player on her in the American? I would argue yes. You would argue no. That's fine. We can agree to disagree.
And it's not. It's not. I'm not knocking KK. I think KK is a great player, but I just believe that the best player.
Nafisa Collier's Nafisa Collier and Katie Lou Samuelson are the 2 best players in the conference, and there's no real debating that as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Coach Abe deserved to get the Coach of the Year award. It's disappointing that she didn't. I would have loved to have seen how the voting broke down. I would be interested to see also how. I'm really interested in. No one will ever talk about this, but I would be interested to know about the politics between the coaches when they go to those coaches meetings in the off season. What coaches kind of ride Geno's coattails and what coaches are kind of standing on the other side saying, hey, look, you might, think you're hot stuff, but, we are also coaches in this league. To what extent are there camps, if you will. I'm sure coaches probably be like, "There's no camps," but I don't know about that.
And I will say this too, because I've had this argument with back with Coach Gillespie when she was the coach at UCF, because we had this argument about when coaches vote for the coach of the year. Like, Renee believed that if you win your league, you should be the coach of the year. You're going to vote because you did a great job leading your team to the champ. And I disagreed with it. And I wonder if some of that is also, hey, Geno is, he won the league, so I'm going to vote for him. My only problem is you didn't vote for him last year. You voted for Jose Fernandez. And everything Abe did this year at UCF was exactly the same thing that Jose did last year. So what's the difference here? What is the difference here? It's unfortunate because I think that coaching staff did a heck of a job with this program. And they talked about it on the broadcast. That the senior group here had 7 wins when she showed up. And now they're leaving as the winningest team in program history. She's done a remarkable job, and I wish she would have been rewarded for this job that she's done, because it's a heck of a job that she's done. And she deserved that award, so I felt bad for her in that regard.
Yeah, and they're not done yet, because as we look at the RPI ranking, UCF is 15th in the country, although Charlie Cream, the chief bracketologist on the women's side for ESPN, has UCF as a, wait for it, 10 seed. Facing Central. He's predicting them going to Iowa City to play Central Michigan, who would be the MAC champion.
They played each other this year already, too.
Yes,
in the regular
they have.
Season. Central Michigan. I hope they don't do that. I hate rematches.
Right.
Like, seriously, committee. I mean, I never give committee credit because I don't think they're real bright. I can do their job pretty easily. Any sport, really. But please, it's not that hard to avoid rematches.
Let's see what else is available out in the Southeast, because they're thinking about, you could do College Station, Texas, for example, but he has Texas A&M as a 4. You could do Miami.
Right. You just stole my point. Here's the thing. Will UCF be a 10 seed? Probably. I know people are talking about the RPI. Buffalo had a similar RPI last year than UCF, and they were like an 11 seed. So just because they have a high RPI does not mean you're going to get a high seed.
Right.
For various reasons I don't want to get into, but whatever. So let's say
you thought the men's tournament was screwed up when it comes to that. You should allow me to introduce you to the women's tournament. Okay, anyway, go ahead. So
let's say UCF is a 10 seed. Odds are they're going to be either in Iowa City, because Iowa won the Big Ten and they're a seed. And I think that's a good draw. By the way, I think Abe has ties to Iowa. They could be in Louisville, which I think would make sense geography-wise. I don't see them being shipped out to Eugene or Stanford if those are the 2 seeds. But you brought up an interesting point, because last year in the women's tournament there was a controversy on selection show. South Florida thought they had a shot to be a 4 seed and host the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. Not only did they not, they actually were a 6 seed. They dropped, and Jose Fernandez flipped out in the press conference after the selection show because he felt they dropped him to a 6 seed so they could bus him to Tallahassee. Basically, kind of the old regional site thing,
right?
Kind of like you see in baseball, soccer, and all that. So he was livid. It would not shock me, Jeff, if they drop UCF to an 11 seed just so they can bus him to Miami, who would be a 3 seed according to Charlie Cream. I would not be shocked by that.
And in that Miami pod, Charlie has the 3 is Miami. They would play Florida Gulf Coast, the ASUN champ, at 14. And right now he's got South Dakota State, the 6th Summit League champion, against 11 seed Ohio. So I don't know. We are going to find that out on Monday. The women's tournament begins on Saturday. Is that right? Yeah. And remember, the women go Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to find out. We haven't heard anything on whether or not the teams are hosting a selection show, right? I know the men, who knows? They might still be in Memphis at that point, I think. Right, Murph?
Correct.
So.
Yeah, I mean, we talked to the SID, Dan Forcella, last week at football practice, and he said they weren't planning on it. But, when you have aspirations of being here till Sunday, you don't plan on a viewing party for the for the tournament selection show. But does that change? Does that change if they lose to Memphis on Friday? I don't know. I look forward to asking Dan that question. He might listen. He might be listening to this podcast.
So Dan, just planting the seed in your head if you're listening, Dan.
I could see it. I think it depends on how far in the tournament they look. I mean, they're hoping Hopefully they're there with you, Murph, when they find out where they're going on Sunday.
Look, I said it earlier this week. You know, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to be here through Sunday, so they might as well hang around with me because that'd be nice.
All right.
Exactly.
All right.
Now,
So
women, they have a week to figure it out. By the way, they have a week to figure it out,
Yeah.
and I think they feel good about being in. I think, in fact, they talked about that on the broadcast.
They should.
Where Abe felt really good, and then they should be in. By the way, if they're a 9 seed, let's say they get bumped to a 9, they would not be placed in Albany because that's where UConn will be as a 1 seed. But they could be placed in a bracket where they play Notre Dame in the second round, or they could be in Starkville against Mississippi State, or it could be in Waco against Baylor. So talk about the differences we talked about with the men. If they're a 9 seed, let's say, they could be in Waco, Starkville, or South Bend, which would be rough. If they're a 10 seed, they could be, in theory, in Iowa City. They could be in Eugene for Oregon, or Stanford, or Louisville.
Ooh.
I think Louisville and Iowa are the ones in play there. But again, conspiracy theory Eric says, don't be shocked if they drop them to an 11 so they can bust them to Miami.
So you're okay. Who gets the higher seed, men or the women?
Men.
Brian?
Men. But
Okay.
I think they're both, men.
All right. I'll hold you to that, guys.
What do you got?
I'm going to surprise. I'm going to go the other.
Hasn't made one
I'm going to go the other way.
prediction the entire show.
I'm going to go the other. Well, you know, I rely on the predictions of experts like you two guys.
Oh, please, Jesus!
I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to say the women surprise everybody, get a higher seed than the men.
What's the number? What number are you predicting?
I'm going to say the women get a 9 and the men get a 10.
Okay.
So, women 9, men 10.
I by the way, I know Eric doesn't want to hear this, but I would really like if the men got a 10 because it's a lot easier to win the second round.
I agree. I would like to.
Can we
get to
just
the
worry
second
about the first round first?
That's also a good point. All right, we're going to take another break. When we get back, we'll dive in with some baseball and softball, and we'll catch you up on tennis when we get back. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, part of the SB Nation Podcast Network. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, and Brian Murphy with you. By the way, how do you like our new little hosting setup here with SB Nation? The podcast is on every page. You literally can't hide from it. Got some new ads dropping in, which is really cool. So yeah, I wanted to thank the guys at SB Nation for helping me out with that. Matt Brown and Joe Gennaro. Thanks for their help in onboarding us with the platform. It's been a blast. So, all right, we're going to wrap up the show by talking baseball, softball, and tennis. First, we'll dive in with baseball, Brian Murphy. 2 games for UCF in the midweek against Yale. They win them both, and that's after dropping 2 out of 3 to Penn State. I don't know. I mean, like, what do we make of it? Now, I know that Penn State is coached by Greg Lovelady's former boss at Wright State, and he taught his Padawan a couple of lessons this past weekend. But 3-2 on the week. I don't know. You tell me. What do we make of that?
Well, I will say this: Sunday was probably the testiest. I think we've mentioned the word testy now twice in the show. It was probably the most testy I've seen Greg Lovelady this season. Well, certainly. I mean, he basically said, we're going to need to do some soul searching. This is after they lost on Sunday to Penn State.
Did he drop the soul searching?
He dropped. We've already reached the soul searching point of the season, Jeffrey. Because what happened is
that doesn't sound
basically
good.
Penn State was really they were the better team, and Penn State has really struggled in the Big Ten under Rob Cooper. Again, the guy who gave Greg Lovelady his first big shot at coaching. And really, he was the guy who Lovelady replaced in Wright State when Cooper took the Penn State job. Cooper and Penn State have not really had great success in the Big Ten, but really look like the better team this weekend. Out-hit UCF, I believe it was 33-20. And if you take away some of the junk runs that UCF got on Sunday in a blowout loss, it was worse than that. And there was a 7-run inning that everything just caved in on the Knights. They couldn't throw strikes. Everything was bad. So
everything was bad.
Everything was bad. Everything was not awesome. Everything was not cool when you're a part of that team because they really did not play well. And so, Lovelady came out with the soul searching, said that we got to go back to the drawing board on basically everything. And so they come out this week. They've beaten Yale twice. I don't think that says anything upon anything. Other than
is Yale good? I mean,
No,
Did George Bush used to play for them at first base?
That's true.
I don't know. I don't know. That's a great fact if true, but I don't bother to look that up. Yale came in at 3-7, so now they're 3-9, and UCF, they just kind of handled their business. So now they get VCU this weekend. VCU is 13-3, and some of those wins that they've gotten, they've beaten North Carolina, and they've also played. I think they played Maryland twice. They lost to Maryland both times, but competitive games. So certainly, a more competitive. I would say, if you told me before last weekend who's the harder team, Penn State or VCU, I'd say VCU. And then we saw what Penn State did to UCF. So I don't think these Yale games mean anything other than it's good to feel good after a really awful, sour weekend. But we're going to see how much this team really learned about itself against VCU before they head into conference play.
I would like to point out that Yale was predicted by Baseball America to be the top team in the Ivy League.
Wow.
That's coming off of a 22-20 record last year. VCU is predicted to be second in the Atlantic 10 behind St. Louis. Last year they went 33-21. So there's that.
But anyway, if you feel better after wins, I mean, breaking news, it's better than losing. That's all I can really say about. That's all I can really say about the Yale wins. And so now
a win is better than a loss.
I mean, really, guys, we're bringing you next level. This is why this podcast was put together. So I
know you're fired up for the win. I know you're fired up. And by the way, George H.W. Bush did play for Yale.
Yes. I told you, it's true. Yeah, he was a team captain. Right?
Right. So, but I have a serious question, Murph, because we didn't get a chance to address this last week because there was a lot of stuff going on with football, volunteer practice and stuff. But there were some significant injuries right now in the pitching staff and that bullpen for UCF. That is a long-term concern that we didn't get a chance to talk about that I think is maybe showed his ugly head a little bit here at Penn State and could be moving forward, right?
Yeah, and Lovelady, even said on Sunday that some of the guys they trust in that bullpen, and they're running out of trustworthy guys because of injuries. They're running those guys. They're running the guys they trust too hot right now. They're overusing them because their starters aren't going deep enough into games. So there's a lot of issues with this team. But to your point, Eric, so Zach Helsel transferred from he started out at Liberty, then he went to JUCO, and then he's coming to UCF. He was really going to be their seventh inning guy, really high leverage righty, kind of sidearm guy. He had Tommy John surgery last week. He's out for the year. Joe Sheridan, who most UCF fans know from his standout freshman campaign and very up and down sophomore year, it's been ruled out that he will not return this season from his shoulder surgery, which he had at the end of last season. And then Ryan, I think his name is Ryan Saltonstall. I'm not even looking at the roster, but I think it's Ryan Saltonstall. He's out for the year with an arm injury. And then there's one other guy that I'm forgetting, and I'm sure Ian McDougall might be listening to this podcast, probably hating me as I blank on the
Ian
fourth
is
guy's
literally
name.
Throwing things right now.
I'm sure he is, because I know Ian does listen to this show.
Yeah.
But UCF is basically down four pitchers. David Litchfield, who was expected to come back some point early in the season before conference play. He's recovering from Tommy John surgery. Lovelady brought him up when talking about important pieces out of their bullpen this year. He was recovering from Tommy John, but apparently he's had complications. So he's out for the year as well. So Sheridan, Litchfield, Saltonstall, and Helsel are all out. And thus, really, in that bullpen, you have basically Jeffrey Hackinson, your closer, who couldn't find the strike zone to save his life on Sunday. Garrett Westberg, I'd say Jack Sinclair, And one of the guy whose name is, this is what happens when I go to basketball. I completely lose my mind with baseball.
You're covering too many sports, Murph.
They don't have a lot of dependable options in their bullpen. So that's why, they go to guys who they need more innings out of, like Jalen Whitehead and Zach Hunsaker. Guys who, like Hunsaker's a true freshman whom they probably were going to redshirt this year, but now they have to pitch him because they're running out of options there and they need big innings out of him. So, the way Lovelady wants to win the games is to have his bullpen really sort of win the last 9 to 12 outs. I mean, I know he talked about his pitchers, his starters needing to go deeper, but really, last year, the last couple of years, this team's strength has been the back end of its bullpen, and now they've really taken quite a few hits already, and it's just going to be interesting to see how this team can deal with it as they go into conference play. This is not – we talked about this last year. The American Conference of Baseball is very, very good. I don't know if they're part of a P5 or a P6 or a P7, because apparently now it's basketball where they're at a P7. But they're one of the top 4 conferences in college baseball. So
you're not.
It's going to be.
Go ahead, Brian. I'm sorry.
It's just going to be difficult, and it already feels like this season's going to be a total like tooth and nail grind every weekend.
You're not making our friend Sam Unger very happy by saying it like that. I'm just trying to point that out.
E6,
E7. Sam is messaging me. He's like, I'm in panic mode right now, man. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you other than it's early. Just hang in there, keep the faith.
No, with this baseball team, it's certainly time to sort of be trepidatious, if nothing else, because again.
So what's the answer here, Murph? Is it, do the starters have to go deeper in the games? Is there certain guys that need to step up that weren't really going to be dependent on? Do they just have to outscore people? What's kind of the resolution, if you will, if they're going to be successful here moving forward with those injuries?
I don't think this team could outscore people. They're not going to be like an ECU that can really like just pound the ball over the yard or something like that. They're going to need to win by pitching, and that means that Grant Sherman, all 3 pitchers really this weekend were very inefficient with their pitches. I think Trevor Holloway on Sunday had 102 pitches in 5 1/3, and I think it took Sherman like 99 pitches to go basically the same distance. They're going to need those guys to go at least 6, and probably more than that, 6 1/3, 6 2/3, because they need to take some of those outs away from the bullpen. Because again, they don't have a ton of guys they feel like they can really trust wholeheartedly right now. And then secondly, those guys that the Westbergs and Hackinsons and guys who are staples at that pen right now, they might need to be used to sort of pitching more than expected, because again, otherwise then you're digging with guys who really have not been in the situation before, and really I don't think have the full trust of the coaching staff yet.
So you heard it here, folks. We are not allowed to be to rest on our laurels after UCF's 8-1 victory over Yale on Wednesday. And with this series coming up against VCU, this is going to be a tough one. By the way, they have the 3 against VCU, and then they go to Tallahassee on Tuesday, the 19th, to play Florida State at 6:00, and then after that,
next Carolina,
next Friday, ECU picked to win the American by Baseball America. And the arsenal of guys that they have coming back. Bryant Packard's back. Spencer Brickhouse is back. Obviously, we know Cliff Godwin is still there. So this thing's going to start to get pretty heavy real quick for UCF baseball. So keep an eye on Brian at _Murphy for all the latest on UCF baseball. Especially,
I'm losing my mind.
Especially
we still have to go to spring football practice too. It's absolutely insane.
I know. Well, you're not going to learn anything about spring football practice. Okay, you don't have to do that. All right. Anyway, so we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk instead about UCF softball. Eric Lopez, who lost earlier tonight to, and by tonight I mean Wednesday night, to number 7 Florida up in Gainesville, 5-0. Florida doing Florida things again. But UCF right now at 17-9 on the season. Even with that loss, they won 4 of their 5 games in the Clearwater tournament, out on the West Coast beat Seton Hall, St. Joe's, Chattanooga, and St. John's. The only game they lost was to Furman 3-2. And now they got a pair coming up against Stetson on Saturday, and then Princeton next Wednesday before they begin conference play against UConn at home. So, to quote the great Tony Kornheiser, where are we now, Eric Lopez?
Well, I think they're still trying to fine-tune some things. They got Stetson doubleheader this Saturday, then a Princeton home game on the following Wednesday, and then they start conference with UConn at home. I mean, look, the Florida game has always been the same storyline. Runs are at a premium. When you have opportunities, you need to take advantage. UCF had some opportunities early against Kelly Barnhill, who's the All-American, former Player of the Year, star pitcher for Florida. They had some opportunities early, didn't get that hit. And Florida, as they always do a great job, especially at home, taking pitches. They get some walks, and then they get that big hit, and before you know it, you're down 2-3 runs. So, it wasn't that drastically of a different game than we've seen, quite frankly, over the years. I think the big takeaway now is, you want to fine-tune yourself offensively. I think this offense, you mentioned the 4-1 in Clearwater. Well, they didn't hit well in their one loss against Furman, and that was disappointing. Really, it was the only disappointment of the weekend in Clearwater. They're still up and down offensively, and I think that's going to be the key factor as we get into conference is timely hitting, because I think their pitching's good enough to win the league. With Elias pitching great, I throw out the game against Florida. I just don't read much into that. And I think Vasquez as a number 2 is solid. So can they get consistent enough hitting, especially as we get into conference, is going to be the key, and will determine the fate of this team in 2019. Because I think this team has the ability to make the NCAA tournament and be back in Gainesville in 2 months, where the committee will put them, because that's what
right
they like
back where they were.
That's right, baby.
When
always are.
When you look around the American, Eric, as like I said, we're one full weekend away from starting conference play. Wichita right now 17-5, Houston 19-8. South Florida's off to a 19-10 start. Tulsa's at 14-8, ECU's at 14-10. The only team who's really off to a bad start is UConn at 4-12. Memphis is 12-10. Who are you keeping an eye on in this final weekend of non-conference play in the American to see how the league might shake out?
Well, it could be just as strong as last year. Last year, the league was number 4 ranked in college softball, so I don't know if that counts as a Power 4, Murph, or whatever you want to call it.
Oh boy,
is it a P4?
We might be P4, P5.
P4?
Yeah, I might go with that. But this league is good. And you mentioned Tulsa. They were supposedly in a rebuild mode because they lost their superstar, Emily Watson, who's the star pitcher. She graduated. Well, they knocked off nationally ranked Arkansas on Wednesday night. So much for that. USF is still good with Corrick. Houston's really good. Wichita State, there's no reason why this league can't get 4 teams in again for like they did last year. The good news for UCF, and this is what I like about this. You look at the teams that, the top 3 teams, we'll say. USF, Houston, and Wichita State all have to come to UCF this year on the schedule. It's the way the schedule works out. Those 3 teams come to UCF this year. So from a scheduling standpoint, UCF has opportunities there. Their toughest road trip will be probably at Tulsa, which is a tough place to play. East Carolina, though, as you mentioned, is even better this year than last year because they had all those kids that last year have kind of grown up to sophomores. So this league is tough. And that's why, again, I go back to it's going to come down to timely hitting with this team. This team has shown their ability at times to hit with runners in score position and explode, and at times they haven't. And I think that will determine their fate because I think the pitching, Aaliyah's pitching well, she's throwing well, and I like Vasquez as a number 2. I think this is their best staff they've had since 2016, which coincidentally was the last time they made the NCAA tournament, and we're, of course, in Gainesville. So,
well, Leah White did win pitcher of the week this past week for the in the American. By the way, I love the graphics that the UCF graphic department's been coming up with, like on the social graphics for the pitcher of the week. It kind of has
give
like
a shout
that.
out to Kelly. I mean, Murph's giving out shout outs to UCF SIDs all over the board. You might as well. Let's run the gauntlet.
I love
Kelly.
I love the sort of baseball cursive script that they kind of use there on that. Kind of neat. I dig that. I think baseball and softball Baseball and softball should be written in cursive whenever possible. All right, so the schedule, like we mentioned, coming up, UCF does not have a home game again for softball until Wednesday, March the 20th, although their next two games, like we said, are at Stetson. So if you want to make the trip up to DeLand, 2 o'clock, two games against Saturday starting at 2 o'clock against our old friends, the Hatters of Stetson. Next home game for UCF is Wednesday against Princeton. All right, real quick, want to catch everybody up on tennis. Men's tennis dropped their two big matches that they had over the weekend. On Sunday, they lost 4-3 to Wake Forest at home, and it was a really tight one. That was a tough loss. Number 2 team in the country that they lost to by one match. And they also lost to number 4 Virginia 4-1, right after, by the way, beating 3 straight ranked teams. So they got to get back on track again on Thursday against Texas Tech, ranked number 32 at home once again. They're 8-7, and if I'm not mistaken, ranked number 33 in the country as of right now. So that's what we're going with based on these rankings that I see on the site. So it's one of those things where, Eric, it's like the RPI, like you move up even when you play a ranked team, a team ranked above you, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, he's played a tough schedule, and
that schedule's ridiculous, man. It's
yeah.
I mean, I get it. That's crazy.
Attention to the rankings too right now. I mean, I remember we've had him on here, and he's like, "Don't look at it right now. You look at it later because they take other." I'm not going to get into the whole.
What are we going to talk about, man? Like we got content to make out here.
We need to show up in person and tell them. I don't know what to tell them.
Women's tennis, by the way, they are 14-2. Having beaten SMU earlier on Wednesday 6-1. Ranked number 46 is SMU. The women's tennis team is ranked 28th. By the way, they also beat Penn. And, of course, last week they beat Miami of Ohio 7-0. So they are in the catbird seat right now with Wichita State, Tulsa, and then Illinois coming up in the next couple weeks here. So, again, do what we haven't done yet and head down to the Collegiate Tennis Center at the USTA National Campus. Check out UCF Tennis next couple weeks. All right, and a couple of other things couple other news notes that I wanted to pass along as we finish up here on the site right now. Cal Bloom, who played tight end for UCF for 4 years, graduated in 2016. Since then, tried his hand at pro football, didn't work out. It has just been announced he is joining the WWE Performance Center. It's kind of like the farm system for the WWE. It's based actually in Orlando. And he will be, they're hoping that he will make his way onto the WWE NXT roster as a professional wrestler here. By the way, sometimes they do shows at my work at Full Sail University. So if you get the chance to check it out, make sure you try to. Bloom is a big kid. He's 6'4", 250, at least that's what he was listed at when he was at UCF. His dad was a professional wrestler, Wayne Bloom, and he wrestled under the name Bo Beverly. He was part of the Beverly Brothers tag team with Mike Enos. He spent 1 year in WCW, 2 years in then WWF. So for Cal, wrestling, professional wrestling in particular, runs in the family. So congrats to Cal. Hopefully we'll get to see him on NXT sometime in the coming months. And one last happy trails that we want to pass along to Andy Seeley, who it was announced last week is leaving UCF. He's the head of the Sports Communications Information Department. He will be leaving to take over the same job, leading it for the Mountain West Conference, the entire conference. So we wanted to pass along tremendous thanks to Andy for all of his support. He's been a guest on the show before. Remember when the Hurricanes were passing through, we were trying to get, and things were going crazy. We were trying to figure out what was going to happen with games. Andy helped us out with a lot of information. He's been at UCF for quite a while, has done a fantastic job with the department, and we're going to miss him here on the show. So congratulations to Andy. job well done. We're going to miss you down here in Orlando. And if we start hearing about a Power 7 campaign coming out of the Mountain West Conference, we know who to blame.
P7.
Yeah. So congrats, Andy. Thanks again.
Very good.
God, I can't talk. What are we going to be working on this week, fellas, with the tournament coming up? Anything interesting, fun coming up down the line for you, Mr. Murphy, first?
Just, I don't know. How about
You're just trying to stave off jet lag. Why am I even asking you?
How about 13 hours worth of sports? I'm going to try to show up tomorrow.
13 Z's in sports.
I have so many Z's. There's going to be a buzzer beater somewhere, so watch out for a hashtag sports with the 6 Z's on the end, because you know it's going to happen.
Big sports.
It's going to be a great week, and the tournament, like, look, right now I am not watching Golden State Warriors versus the Houston Rockets. I'd much rather watch a Pittsburgh-Syracuse game, which is literally sending basketball back 20 years.
I'm a Syracuse fan, and I don't want to watch that right now.
Because
I'm just not interested.
So much more this time of year. I mean, Syracuse needs to get that win, so it's just so fun to watch. Also, if I may,
they're going to try really hard not to get it. Trust me, I've seen this before.
And they're losing right now, Jeffrey, at the half. So don't you worry. They're trying their damnedest not to get it.
Yep.
If I may take a minute. I need to redeem myself from a really bad baseball segment where I couldn't remember people's names. And one name I didn't mention, which is really important because he's really been UCF's best reliever this year, is Kyle Kemp. Because Kyle Kemp has 16 Ks and 4 walks and 11 and 10 scoreless innings this year. We talk about all their issues with their bullpen, talked about how their closer couldn't find the strike zone and all these issues. Kyle Kemp has been the guy that Lovelady could turn to at any point and lean on, and he's been great. So, you've got 4 guys. Again, resetting the table here. 4 guys: Jack Sinclair, Kyle Kemp, Garrett Westbrook, Jeffrey Hakinson, I should say. Other than that, it's kind of a mismatch of we don't really know what we got. We're gonna have to figure it out on the fly, and that's what is going to be a problem for this team as they head into the conference tournament. I had to say that, because I felt like I didn't do it any justice 15 minutes ago. But again, I'm very tired.
Listen,
I haven't slept all day.
Listen, we're not the guys you need to explain yourself to. You take it up with Ian.
Ian's so mad at me right now.
Lopez, what do you got?
He hasn't even been to Beale Street yet.
Right.
By the way, Murph, how proud are you of Jeff? There was a wrestling topic that took place in this show, content of wrestling, and neither you or I were involved in it. How about that?
I've got my new favorite pro wrestlers. I got my new favorite pro wrestlers, Cal Blue.
Good for you.
There you go. So,
well, there you go.
I'm jumping on board early, man. I am on the Cal. I've reserved my seat.
If they do their shows at NXT tapings at Full Sail, so I'd like to think that you have an opportunity to catch them there. When he gets to that point. But anyway, so got content right now on the site. Got an article I wrote about BJ Taylor and Taco Fall, about how they've cemented their legacies no matter what happens the rest of the way, helping this program with the accomplishments they have had, leading this program to the NIT, on the verge here of the NCAA tournament. And both of them have had setbacks. They've had adversity throughout their careers. It was not a smooth thing, but I make the argument in the article that while, guys like a Jermaine Taylor is certainly the best player in the program history, I'm not sure there's been 2 more important and influential players in the history of this program than BJ Taylor and Taco Fall. So you can read about that, and I explain it on Black and Gold Banneret. We got men's basketball TV numbers on the Banneret up there right now. And I'm going to give a shout-out to Megan Herbuth, because she's the only SID that hasn't gotten a shout-out on this episode. So I will give it to her because she is the SID of women's basketball. And if they make the tournament officially on Monday, she has made the NCAA tournament in every sport that she has worked under at UCF. She was 2 years with softball. They went to the NCAA's women's soccer tournament. She's done, the dynasty with rowing. Jeff could tell you more about the rowing dynasty. She's been involved in that, track and field, now women's hoops. So shout out to Megan, since when that completes
Let's not jinx it. Let's not jinx it for her sake, please. Don't jinx it.
I'm thinking if we want UCF football to get into the CFP, we need to get Megan on the job.
That's right.
Like
that's what's holding us back.
That's what's holding back.
Well, we would have to probably clone her in that scenario. Work on that. So shout out to you. Does a great job as always on that. And shout out to Murph, because make sure you follow Murph. He's going to be in Memphis. He's going to be there for every dribble of the American Conference Championships. Adam Amin is expecting you to talk to him because I talked to Adam on the phone and he was bummed out we couldn't come on the show, but he's like, is Murph going to be there? And I told him about Murph, so everybody is looking forward to that.
Wow.
We're going to play Where in the World is Brian Murphy this weekend.
That's right. It's a great game.
Next couple weeks. Yeah, I mean, this week Memphis, next week San Jose, next week Boise. I don't know. Let's go.
TBD, man.
So Murph's going to be there all week in Memphis for the conference championship. And then, Jeff, I think we can announce this. We will be doing probably an emergency podcast, or I don't like to say emergency. It's not really like probably
it's
a
not
special
unexpected.
A scheduled emergency podcast.
Yeah.
Right. A special edition.
Does that make it a drill? I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll be doing a March Madness podcast. We're working on seeing if we can get a couple guests on for that. But again, Selection Sunday. We're going to see where UCF heads to most likely. I mean, you never want to count your chickens before they hatch, but we're feeling pretty good about it at this point. Don't forget the women's selection show is Monday. That's where we find out where the UCF women will play as well.
It would be historic, by the way. It would be the first time both the men and the women made the NCAA tournament in the same year, if it happens.
That's true. Mm-hmm. That's true. So we have that to look forward to, which is nice. All right, let's wrap this thing up. blackandgoldbanneret.com is where you want to go, part of SB Nation. Don't forget to follow us at UCF_Banneret on Twitter. Follow us individually at Jeff_Sharon, Eric Lopez Elo, Spokes_Murphy. Follow also all of our other guys as well, including Luke Saris, who's been doing a lot of good work for us. Jeremy Brenner's been doing some work. Zach Goodall, who, by the way, is crying in his Jacksonville Jaguars pillow right now because the Jags signed Nick Foles to a spectacular contract.
Have fun with that.
And the word came
spectacularly disastrous contract.
And word came down actually late tonight that Blake Bortles has been released. By the Jacksonville Jaguars, which was not a surprise. But Lopez, don't you realize that this paves the way for him to redeem himself with the Miami Dolphins? Don't you realize that?
Why doesn't he just go to the Giants there? I hear there's great openings there since they're getting rid of everybody. That's good.
Well,
Eric, it's too soon. Come on now.
It's not. No, I'm not going there. I'm not going there.
Jeff, you've already been on record as to where you think Blake Bortles should play next, and it's really an illustrious job.
Yeah, New England backup.
Please, you've already mentioned AF about 6 times.
Oh yeah, that's right. Well, you could go to the Apollos. You never know. I don't know if maybe not. The Apollos are undefeated with Garrett Gilbert. Why would they want to shake it up?
Yeah.
So.
Well, the Dolphins is not out of the question. They're talking to Teddy Bridgewater as we tape this. So if they don't get Bridgewater, I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, who knows? Hey, I'm looking forward to the Dolphins and Giants battling out for the number 1 pick for the next foreseeable future.
Oh, it's going to be great. The fan tanking is going to be strong with this one over here between those two. It's going to be a blast. Congrats to Latavius Murray, who also signed a deal with the Saints earlier today.
That's a heck of a move. Yeah,
that's a very cool move. With Mark Ingram moving on, he's going to be so that unites 2 UCF guys, Traycon Smith and Latavius Murray. So congrats to Latavius.
By the way, Rashad Perriman, who was going to go to Cleveland, is not going to go to Cleveland because they got some receiver named Odell Beckham, who's pretty good at football.
Never heard of him.
So Perriman now is going to go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because of that. He's going to sign with the Bucs.
Right. So there's your late-breaking NFL free agent news right here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, which you can follow us on Twitter at UCF_Banneret for all the latest on UCF players, past and present. You can also follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret. For Eric Lopez and Brian Murphy and all of us here at Black and Gold Banneret, I'm Jeff Sharon saying thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on Selection Sunday. Find out where the Knights are going in the NCAA Tournament. Thanks again for listening. Catch you later.